Hi, folks. So, once again, I want to talk about books, one in particular. And in thinking about what I wanted to say, I wanted to start off by saying that a good book delights you. A truly great book can change you. But the best books can do both. So, one of my all-time favorite books, possibly at the very, very, very top of the list, is Ursula Le Guin's The Dispossessed. Folks, I love this book so much. The Dispossessed is set in a distant star system. Its twin planets share a history and once shared a people. Some of them, though, left the planet that they once shared and migrated to the other, which was much less hospitable, and that was part escape, part exile. And for almost 2 centuries, these two societies have coexisted side by side with minimal contact. So the story picks up when a person on one society, the exiles or escapees, comes up with a theory that the scientists of the other society want. However, he doesn't just give them the information. And I think it's been a little bit since I've read this. I think at the beginning, he hasn't completely worked it out. It's kind of in his head, but he doesn't have all of the calculations and formula and the math of it. He's a physicist, so there's math. When I say there's math in it, I mean that there's math kind of behind it. As a physicist, he has a very logical, reasonable way of thinking through things, and that's one of his characteristics. It's not that there's a whole lot of math in the book itself. So if you're looking for a mathematics textbook, this ain't it. On the other hand, if the thought of having math in a story scares you, hopefully that makes you feel a little bit better. The key is that he's grown up in one society that has a very strong set of values and gone back to the society that his ancestors were pushing against when they left. And nobody from his society has ever gone back since. And additionally, when members of this other society come to their planet, all they do is pick up the ore that's been mined by the exiles and take it back. There's almost no contact between these two people groups. And so they've kind of gotten even more set in their ways. There was a split between them, and that is what resulted in the people who go to Anaris leaving Urus, where they originally came from. So it's this values dissonance and this willingness to understand, but coming from a place of not understanding and complete unfamiliarity, to seeing what this other society is like, seeing what has happened to the society that his people left because of what it was like. Le Guin is careful to indicate that neither society is perfect. The subtitle for the story is an ambiguous utopia. And my book doesn't have it on there. It just says a novel, which is also true. But although Le Guin is looking at Honoresti society as somewhat utopian, some of that is because the protagonist, that's where he's from, and those are the values that he holds. But he's also reasonable enough to notice that his society isn't perfect. There are still challenges and problems that are likely to come up anytime people live together, because different people like different things and want different things and don't always get along. So that is in the nature of any society. But when he goes to this other society, he sees that some of the problems that his society has, this one doesn't have. But some of the problems they were trying to get away from still exist in this society, and in some cases have gotten worse because they don't have this other group of people pushing against it anymore. So because he values what he grew up with and what he has come to take on as his own, he kind of pushes back and he becomes something of a revolutionary figure. This book is amazingly quotable, and some of the concepts that it explores encourage you and invited me to rethink a lot of the things that we don't even take for granted. They're so embedded in our psyche that it doesn't occur to us to think differently about them, such as the concept of ownership. That was one of the things that the Odonians, who went to Anaris to escape Urus, were pushing back against. The society that they were in was fairly heavily capitalistic, although the poor people on Urus don't seem to have it too bad. It's just that they notice that there's a difference between how they live and how the rich people live. And they're not always real happy about it. And on the other hand, on Anaris, everything is shared. Everyone has the opportunity to work towards what they want if they can get other people to help them out, if they need help, or they can work on it independently. They are not obliged to help each other out, but there's some sort of underlying social expectation of contributing to the greater good. But they're not forced to by any of their laws. Their paradigm is that there are no laws, that each person works as an individual and is granted full functionality. But there are expectations that have, and Shevik notes this, come to be so customary and so accepted that they carry the force of law. So he comes to this society where there is this disparity in what people can do and what they have access to. And this is anathema to him. He sees this as unfair and unjust and very cruel. And the people who are used to the society don't necessarily understand why he's pushing back against this. It questions what it means to own something and why that matters and what happens when you don't, and who has power and how power works, which are all important things to think about anytime you're going to be around other people, which for most of us is an awful lot of the time. The people who left Urus and moved to Anaris, the Anaresti, or the Odonians, as they also call themselves, because of the philosopher revolutionary who founded their movement, they're sort of like the ones who walk away from Omelas, because they are leaving a society that they feel is dependent and only works by insisting that some people have to suffer for the prosperity of all. And the place that they go, because it is so bleak and doesn't have a lot of natural resources, they all struggle. But they all struggle together. Everyone struggles pretty much equally. And so they both give something up, but they also gain something. So it deals with a lot of pretty deep social concepts. The societies are at a technological level that is pretty contemporaneous with when it was written, which was the 1970s. So some of the technology is like futuristic. They have space travel, interplanetary travel, but it's not, not super, super advanced. And Shevik's theorem is what allows for some of the technology that will become their future. It allows it to develop. It allows them to develop near instantaneous communication, which of course then allows for, planning if you're migrating to another planet, you can explain what you're going through and what you're seeing as you're doing that. So it allows for further travel, but still near instantaneous communication, which becomes important for the development of other stories. But it's pretty clear that this is one of Le Guin's later works, because the prose itself, it's not simplistic, but it is clear and enjoyable to read. The little bits of things that are speculative and indicate that this is not happening in our world are unfamiliar, but there's enough that's familiar about it because there are people and there is travel and there are things that are comfortable and things that are uncomfortable. And it's explained and described in such a way that you can figure it out as you go. And it's pretty clear what is made up and is important to the society and what's made up just, kind of for flavor. The clarity of her writing, again, it's not simplistic, but it doesn't have that dense, sometimes convoluted, tightly packed language and very technical, jargony description that infects a lot of hard science fiction. I wouldn't call this soft science fiction. There's definitely some thinking about the science that drives the story forward, and it is dependent on it. Because, of course, if Shevik doesn't have, the nature of this theory, it matters for what they're trying to do with it, and that does influence the story, even though it's not completely dependent on it. And it's not really what the story's about. But there's just enough there. It kind of adds some flavor. This could have been done as an alternative historical fiction set on Earth, like an alternate Earth. And she chose not to do that. Partly, I think, because she already had her science fiction-y worlds and she's building into that. But this is its own story. It stands alone. You don't have to read the rest of it. And it's strong just by itself. But at the same time, it also benefits from her earlier thinking. And I really think this book is it's definitely one of the greatest novels of the 20th century. Is it the greatest novel of the 20th century? Maybe. Of course, if you have another idea about what the greatest novel of the 20th century actually is, you know what I want you to do, right? Leave a comment. Tell me what your favorite novel is, what you think the greatest novel of the 20th century is, whether it's literary, speculative fiction, genre fiction, whatever. I love those comments. And as always, thank you so much for watching. Bye for now.